What's up everybody, my name is Rick and I'm a professional 3D artist. I worked on some really cool titles like Forza Horizon 5 and Hitman 3. And in this video we're gonna go over the full process on how to start your environment, where we go from a simple box in Blender to a fully finished environment in Unreal Engine. And begin a new video series called Let's Create, where I take you through the full pipeline of creating a finished environment. But first, we have to start by collecting some reference. Now, finding reference for your environment can be approached in two different ways. Either you look at an existing concept art that has been created by one of the many amazing concept artists in ArtStation, and your goal is to create exactly what they made. And it is actually very challenging, but it's a good way to train your modeling skills and to train your eye to really pick up the details that the concept art created in there, right? It seems easy, but it is really not. It's very difficult to exactly create what has been made by a one still image into 3D. And yes, I modeled this cone for this example. Worth it! Now, the other way is to create something from a bundle of ideas, not necessarily one image, but many images. This can be a little bit more challenging because you have to fill in a lot of gaps with your own visual library. And to create a visual library, you just need to find a bunch of images. So the way I approach it is to first get one or two images in every category, which to me are three most important categories, which is mood, is your ideas, and your art style. Having these 6 images is a great start. Having these 3 categories is a great start, but it's not going to be enough to create a whole environment. We have to expand on this. And in order to do that, I'm going to bring you guys into my PureRef scene. And if you don't know PureRef, it is a free software where you can make a lot of mood boards. You just throw in your images in there and you can add text around it just to make it a little bit easier to see. Open PureRef, you just get treated with this gray screen with nothing in it, and the way you can do it is you can just copy and paste images in there, move them around, make them smaller or bigger, pressing Ctrl N. You can add a little text note where you can add stuff in there. One really cool feature actually about PureRef is you can select a bunch of images and press Ctrl P, and it just orders them around neatly in a neat fashion, which is great when you start going into higher detail of reference. Now, we haven't even talked about the environment that we're going to create, so let's just jump into it. I really got inspired when I saw this image over here. I absolutely love this old school vehicle kind of modeled into a plane. And I wanted to do something with this. I thought of if you know the Tony Stark Tower, this high skyscraper with a heli platform, and I wanted to create this as well. Something in the minds of this, where you have this one tech genius living above the city and creating his own inventions, which could be such a cool idea to work from. And then you have a beautiful view of the city. So this is what I wanted to do. But in order to do that, I had to find my few images, right? And to explain, these were the ideas. This is kind of the mood that I want to go for. I love the colors. I love the feel that these give, like kind of like messy, high tech. This is the art style that I saw, which I absolutely loved. It's nice and simplistic and very pleasing to the eye. This one over here is mainly. It's not necessarily any of the pillars, but it was just kind of the city skyscraper that you see, the vista, the nice view that you could have of this environment. Now, like I said, these 6 images are not going to be nearly enough. So let me just show you how I expand on this. And the way I do that is I wanted to know the building, a bit further exploration of the mood, some ideas of the interior, some clouds. And as you can see, this is why PureRef is so nice. You can just mesh some images together, throw a title on it, and then when you start working on your environment, it is very easy to go back and forth into your collection, into your reference, and get some ideas out of it, right? Because in this interior, there's no way I'm going to make this interior looking exactly like this, but it's a great frame of reference to just go back into. If I need anything high-tech or any high-tech ideas, I just can go into this over here and look at some of the images that I collected here, right? So for example, in this image, it's a little bit low res, but I really love this open floor plan above here, like a control room almost, where you have this window looking over everything. Now this is a window over here, but this we can just open up and make it a door. So we have the plane that can actually go outside, right? And on our mood, like I just wanted to collect a few more images that could inspire me when I'm creating this scene. And the same as the building, right? And this is where you see the Tony Stark building that I was talking about. I really like the futuristic design of it. So when I start modeling, you can see that I took a lot of reference from it. And now this is why I call finding reference kind of like a pyramid. If I zoom all the way out, you can see the total reference that I kind of found for the scene right now. And it starts with the 6 images or just a few images that really nail down your scene. From there on, you're gonna look out, you're gonna expand it a little bit more, right? Get a little bit more ideas from it and a little bit closer look of everything. Now, then you go into the Wild West of finding reference, where you look a little bit very close into minute details, right? So if we look at the vehicle, I'm already starting to look into some closer reference, like how is a plane actually created, the engine itself, some authentic cars, anything like that. We can really dive in deeper. But I can tell you, you don't really need this for your Whitebox yet. We will go over this more in our next video, when we dive in a little bit deeper on creating smaller details, right? Now that we have all the reference figured out, at least most of it, you know, we will come back to this and add a lot, remove some. It is a very dynamic process, right? It is not now, this is going to be the reference for the rest of our life while working on this scene. It is going to be added and removed. But let's actually jump into a 3D software. It can be any 3D software of your choice. It doesn't have to be the one that I'm working in. The most common are going to be 3ds Max, Maya, and Blender. I worked in all of them many years, but 2 years ago I started going to Blender, and I absolutely love it. Really like the way modeling works in there. I love the way the viewport looks. So let's jump into Blender. If you're not familiar with what a Whitebox is, let me quickly give a demonstration on how to model a Whitebox, right? So I'm gonna get my reference here. This is PureRef. If you want to have it always on top, you can press Ctrl-Shift-A, and now when I click on Blender, this will still be on top, right? So put our reference to the side here. You can see the server rack has a lot of detail in here that we can model out when we start working on it, but it's not necessarily needed for when we make Whiteboxes. You can actually decide on how much detail you really need in your scene to make this a server rack, right? Now, you can see that it actually has a very boxy shape. So if I press Shift A here and have a cube, technically this right here, let me actually get my mover cursor here. This right here could be a good enough example of what you need as a server rack. It honestly doesn't have to be much. It is already the shape that you need, and it might already give you the idea in your scene enough to get a composition going, right? If you want a little bit more, let's say you want these shelves over here, right? We can do a quick inset with I and then extrude with A right there, and then create another cube over here, scale this down and scale this down like this. Then if you have the HardOps plugin, you can just have array here. And then you can move this up or down and add like a few more layers. If you don't have it, you can go also in modifiers and add modifier and then add an array over here. Now this again is a little bit more of a detailed Whitebox of a server rack, but again it is enough detail of what you need. It really depends on what you want. Do you want to add the screen? Go ahead, make a screen. But this is the fun part about a Whitebox. We created this whole idea, this whole concept. Now in a matter of seconds, we don't need more detail on it. The more detail we add to it, it's just gonna be sort of a waste of time, because when we start modeling it out, we're gonna model it out properly and we're gonna add textures in it. So now we're gonna jump into a time lapse of me modeling out the whole scene, which is gonna be more interesting to look at than seeing me model a box for 30 minutes and end with a box with a few insets and extrudes. Now jumping into the time lapse, you can see that I'm starting to model out the plane. The reason why I model out the plane first is because it's going to be the center part of my scene, right? The most important part of the scene that I'm going to create. And as I showed before, this plane in the image has maybe a lot of detail, but we don't really care about the detail whatsoever. We just care about the shapes and how the final result looks good enough to have an idea what it would look in the very end, right? So here you can see that I'm basically just working from boxes, extruding a bunch of stuff, insetting a bunch of stuff, and that's gonna be the whole Whitebox phase for you. And adding the rotors as the final touch. I think it was important to have this kind of stuff in the scene. And that's basically it for the plane. Now, creating the environment itself is going to be a little bit more difficult because I don't necessarily have one image to work from, right? So it's going to have to be a lot of experimenting. And this is why we want to work in as little detail as possible. Because the more detail you add in here, the more things you're going to try and clean up, the more you're just actually spending time on something that you not going to even use, right? So as you can see over here, I'm using a lot of boxes. This is the crane that I'm making right now. You can see the reference image that I have on that on the side here. We don't know if any of these elements are really going to stay this way. They can always still change, but it is good to have it all blocked out in here. You can see here I'm making the bedroom and getting kind of the windows done, and overall like slowly getting these shapes ready. I'm experimenting a little bit with the window, and again I want to really emphasize that these are changes that we might want to keep, we might want to change, but it's good to get an overall view of it, and once we are happy with the kind of result, we want to bring it into Unreal Engine, right? So now that I have the general layout somewhat where I liked it, I have to make a little bit more adjustments, and after this I will also show you one step that I haven't shown here that I did in between the process, because it's not as easy just to create an environment from absolutely nothing. There's sometimes that you want to take a step backwards and draw out a blueprint to really start thinking about the uses of space, right? So here I start making the saloon on the right side, the lounge, then you have the elevator in the center, and on the right side are more the tech department, right? You have the desk, a little desk chair, the desk itself with the monitors on top of it. And this is actually the server racks that I modeled out, and in this case I just modeled it out as boxes. Now there is something went wrong in the footage, but at all, now we're getting already close to the final result, as in the final result of the Whitebox. That doesn't mean that we're gonna keep it like this at the end, but it means that this is a good base to start from, and from here we can really start looking what things do we want to add and what things we want to change. Now, as you can see here, I also completely blocked out the exterior of this building. Now, that might be strange because I might not even use the exterior in my final shots, but I think it is an important stage, at least for me in this case, since I wasn't 100% sure what I was going to model, and modeling out the exterior gave me a good feeling of how I want the interior to look like. So this is a step that I mentioned in the time lapse that I want to go over right now, because creating an environment from your mind sometimes will need a little bit more help, right? Just to figure out what kind of floor plan you want, how you want the environment to feel like, and what the purpose of every space in the place is. And since I was struggling with that while working in 3D, I quickly made a top-down screenshot and did a few drawings over it just to figure out for what area what purpose has, right? So here would be the lounge, and then I have a reference image with that, the nerd cave. Then in here we have the kitchen, which I don't have in the floor plan here, but since I want it to be this guy's apartment, we need to make sure it has all the facilities. Then here's going to be the garage in the center, and as you can see, I drawn out a place where you have an emergency staircase, so it gave this little area a little bit more purpose as well. And these kind of things you can figure out when you do a stage like this. For example, here I don't really mind what this room is because I'm not gonna model it out, so we can just throw that in there. And then on the top floor, since the little floor that is gonna be above everything to oversee everything, was gonna be the bedroom. So just doing phases like this can be really useful when you're struggling, when you get stuck with something. Maybe there's a different way to approach it, and in this case it was just creating a floor plan. Now, breaking this scene up, I have it basically over here in my hierarchy already, right? We have the roof, we have the floor, we have the walls itself, we have the launch pad, the crane system, and the dressing. This is something special what we're gonna do with, but first let's remove all this bedroom too. So now this is the set dressing that I did, right? Now the set dressing we actually want to do in Unreal and we don't want to do in Blender. since we only want to make one chair and move this around in Unreal. We only want to make one desk, and you see we all have this repeated, right? So in order to set it up for export, I actually divided it all up in the assets that we currently have in the scene. Now at the moment we don't have that many, but again, we will expand on this, right? So now this beautiful thing over here is a bed. I mean, you could sleep on it, but I would prefer to have at least a blanket and a pillow. So this is something that we will later add to it as well, right? These are cabinets for the kitchen. This is a fridge. As you can see, it's a beautiful design of a fridge, but everything is now displayed as a single unit and it can be exported. Now, if you work in Blender, there's going to be one add-on that it's a must-have to have when you are working in scenes like this for environment, where you just want to have all of these exported in one, separately, I mean, with one button click, right? Instead of going here and then click export, going to the folder structure that you need, and then save it over, override it, it's going to be a mess. So what you have is all these things are properly named. I would definitely say naming conventions are very important when you work in a scene, because it's going to be messy otherwise and you have no idea what's going to happen afterwards. So they are properly named, and then I have a plugin right here, which, let me look it up. This plugin is called Blender Super Batch Exporter Main. If you won't remember it, no worries, I'll put a link in the description. It's definitely a must-have. It's a free Blender add-on. And basically what it does, if I select this all and I go into here, we have a batch export. We can put in the directory where we want it. If you want, you can even put in a prefix and a suffix. What that means is whatever the name is of your objects over here, it will either add a little text in the front or it will add a little text at the end. Then also you can choose the format. Normally I always just work in FBX when you import stuff into Unreal. And that's basically all the options that I go over. More of the options in here are something that I haven't really had to use yet. The most important thing is still where your origin is, right? So you can see in these models, all my origin points are exactly where I want the pivot point to be in Unreal Engine. So when I export this from here with the batch exporter, it's going to use exactly this pivot point right here. Now the last thing before exporting is to assign a material the same name as that you would do in Unreal Engine. I will explain to this later, but basically what it means is this material name right here, if I have exactly the same material name in Unreal with the correct export settings or import settings, it's going to apply that material instantly, right? So it's going to save you a lot of time on drag and dropping a material into the material slot for each of these assets right here. So now that we have everything ready to be exported, let's actually jump into Unreal. Let's create a project and get started. Now, creating an Unreal project is going to be very simple. You just need to get the Epic Game Launcher. Then in Library, you can choose your engine version. Currently, I'm using 5.0, but I'm actually going to go to 5.1. The way you do it is you just click Launch. Then you wait a little bit. Then when it's all loaded up, you're going to get greeted by this panel over here. And you just have your recent projects. As you can see, I already made a project, but we're going to open in a bit. Then you can choose if it's going to be a game, right? So you can do first person, third person, top down, but also no worries. You can always still load these things in once you already created a project. And let's say you wanted to walk around in it, you can just drag this in there, film, architecture, all that kind of stuff. But what I'm going to do is we're going to go into games and I'm going to go with blank. Now over here, once you have your template selected, you can make a few changes on the settings. I don't think there are going to be many changes that we have to make, but for me, since my PC can handle it and I never worked with this before, I'm going to turn on ray tracing. And then the project location, you can just put it in the folder location that you want and then the name. But since we already have a project, I'm going to open that one up right now. When you created your new project, you're going to get greeted by this scene over here, which is going to be the default Unreal scene with always the pleasing looking chairs and table. But we want to add our own stuff in here, of course. Before we do this, we want to create some sort of a folder structure just so it is going to be a clean layout when we start working on it, right? Because as you can imagine, we're going to add a lot of stuff in here. We're going to add a lot of objects, a lot of materials, textures, etc. So if we don't really prepare this forward, it's going to be a mess when we just start throwing everything in, right? So This is already the project that I worked on, but let's go over the main folders that we have to create, which is the mesh folder. This is where you're gonna have all your assets, right? And we're gonna divide them in props and environment. And in this case, I also have Vista, which is gonna be all the buildings around the environment. Then we have a material folder. This is gonna be very important as well. And in the material folder, we have environment materials, the master materials, and Whitebox materials. For as of now, we will expand on this when we start working on it. What master materials are, I will explain in a little bit. Then we also have a folder of maps. And later on, when we really need it, when we start texturing, we will also have a texture folder. Now, coming back to how we want to set up our scene, one thing is very important is we have to create one Whitebox material. So to open this up right here, you can see it's very basic. It's just a vector parameter where we have a white color into the base color. It's that simple. The reason why we have a master material is just so we can create instance materials and change the color of it, right? So no, we do not want to save this beautiful change. So after we created the Whitebox material, if we want to make any different colors, right, we can just right click on it, create an instance. In this case, we can throw it in our Whitebox folder. And from there, we just gave it the correct naming, which is MI for material instance, and then Whitebox. And in this case, it's gonna be, let's say, red, and then O1. So then when you open it up, instead of having this complicated shader view, you just have this one parameter over here, which is color, and we can make it beautifully red. So in this case, we have a red Whitebox material. Now, this is basically the whole setup that we want to have for now, for the scene. So as you can see, copy this material name and make sure that in your 3D scene, if it's Maya, 3ds Max or Blender, the material that you export with is going to be the same name as the material in Unreal Engine. Now, the reason why it's so important to have the same naming in your 3D software as the same naming of your material in here is because it's going to save you a lot of time, right? If we have 20 objects over here and I would want to change the material name, I will have to open this up, I will have to go to my Whitebox, I will have to drag this in here, save, etc. You can already see this is taking a lot of time and anything that can be easier, we want to do easier, right? So if they have the same name, we can right click here, we can import and go to the folder structure where you have exported everything. And here I have a test, right? This is just a simple cube. And the main settings that you have to look out for is in the material over here. Normally it has an import texture also. It has, instead of do not create material, it has create a new material. So what we want to do for the settings is we don't want to create a new material because we already have one. So do not create a new material. And in the search location, we want to go under all assets. So normally on default is on local, so it will just look in this folder over here. And if it does not have that material, it's not going to apply everything. So in this case, we want to go look under all the assets and then import. Now, when it is imported, you can see that this beautiful box over here has the material connected. And that is the main important thing because it's going to save us a lot of time in the end. Now that we have everything imported, we are ready to go to build the scene. Now we're starting with a time lapse into Unreal and it's going to be very simple. We're just going to drag out our main pieces, right? Since we don't have anything modular, it is just as easy as dragging it in and putting it on the 0, 0, 0 position until everything is looking fine. And now we're gonna do the set dressing, right? So we exported our assets separately, so we just have one desk. In this case, it's this beautiful cube. We have our desk chairs and we can move them around. And we do basically the same thing as that we did in Blender, but now we can do it in Unreal. Because once we start modeling out any of these assets into further detail, we just only have to do this once in one object in Blender, and once we are happy with it, we can export it and everything in the Unreal scene is going to be updated. And this is where the magic happens because it's going to go from looking slowly like Whitebox into more and more detail. So this is why it's such a fun part of the process, right? So as you can see, I'm basically doing the same layout as that I did in Blender. So I'm just going to let you guys listen to some music while you can watch me build out this scene in Unreal. And there you go, guys. Everything that we worked on this episode is now in Unreal Engine, and I'm really excited on how this is looking. I hope you guys are just as excited on how this is looking and how it's gonna turn out. And in the next episode, we're gonna go over fixing up some of this geometry that we made, right? Since this is all a mess and we have to clean it up. We're also going to be working on the surroundings, because now if you look out of the window, let's just say it's not a pretty view. We have to make the buildings around it and make it look like a full, complete scene. And thank you so much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. And before we leave, I'm going to show you a final shot of the environment that we have right now. And I hope you guys enjoyed, and see you next time. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.